Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking the New Leave It to Beaver. I am Mike Cannici. He is Bryan Nelson Jr. And, we discussed doing this for a good month and we're going to see how this goes. But we're going to talk about new Leave It to Beaver episodes. We're going to comment on characters, um, like I said, episodes. And tonight, to kind of start things off, we're going to talk about the movie. And, Bryan, one thing that I always looks like your doorbell's ringing, but
That's the
one,
clock.
oh, okay. I thought this was the perfect title, and I don't know why they didn't keep it for the TV series because it sounds to me a lot better than the new Leave It to Beaver.
Yeah.
Still the Beaver, but interesting movie. Came out in 1983, and I was a young kid then. I think I was maybe in first grade when the movie came out, and I had watched reruns of Leave It to Beaver, and one of the things that was tough for me about the movie, like because it was constantly in my head, was that Hugh Beaumont had passed away, and he wasn't going to be on the movie, and that was like the first time as a young kid that I realized that death is reality, and so that was the tough part of that movie for me. I don't know how you felt.
Actually, I think we're around the same age, and I didn't see it until it was chopped up in 4 episodes, and even it was after that. I don't know what that came from. It was even after that because it was years later, and then it was after it run at a series. But yeah, and I was thinking why wasn't Hugh Beaumont there? What did he die in real life? Did he not want to do the series? And it was always disappointed that he wasn't in there. And it's funny you mentioned the title. Brian Levant, the father of the new series and the movie, I interviewed him on fancounters.com last year, and he had said that the new Leave It to Beaver was a title, the very title he did not want to call it. There was a couple of different titles that he had come up with, and Still the Beaver was the one. And so it did change after the first season of the series. But it was unfortunate that Hugh Beaumont had to pass away. Same thing with Fred Rutherford. They had put a new one in, and so
which was a mistake. I didn't like that too much, but I think they had probably shot that and they felt like they had to do that. But
well, and it was because they had already written those episodes when Fred Rutherford, Richard Deacon was still alive. So they were already in the can. So
right. So interestingly, if memory serves me right, and I could be wrong, but I think the show originally started either on NBC or ABC, then moved to the other one, for the next 5 years. So interestingly, CBS had the rights to the movie, which, it's happened before. I've seen the Brady Bunch do that as well, so that wasn't, but it is weird when you see a show that's been on one network its whole life. And then when they do the reunion, they always seem to be on a different network. And, that's, it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But, to me, these shows are associated by the networks they were on.
Well, and CBS is where the first and second season of the original series was.
Yeah.
So CBS, and then it moved later on. I believe I can't remember if it was ABC or I believe it was ABC, and but CBS originally. So quite fitting that the movie on CBS. Yeah.
Yeah. So it starts off very unique. It starts off with Beaver's wife throwing him out, and this is the one thing that always kind of bothered me, Bryan, is I know you got to do it for TV reasons. You have to have a plot. You have to have all this. But, I mean, poor Beaver, when he was a kid, he was always kind of like, making mistakes. And now in his adult life, you see that maybe he's not a great husband. And he just gets kicked out of the house, and this would never fly in 2021, I don't think. But, like, not letting him take the car, like that came with the company, with her father's business. And, you just kind of really feel bad for Theodore Cleaver, because he never seems to have a happy ending.
No. And, it's funny. You talk about plots and you talk about background stories. It's funny. Corey Feldman was the original older brother in the show, in the movie.
Yeah.
And when they translate it, then they transition to the TV show. When you get to the end, and I'm sure we'll do this at one point, the 2-part ending of the series, you had, the mother came back.
And it was a different actress.
Yeah, and a different actress, but it was weird because Kip was kind of set aside in that plot. It was really weird because he wasn't in the movie when she was around. It wasn't even his character. It was Corey Feldman, Kip Cleaver, Kip Marcus. So it was almost like they kind of couldn't do a whole lot with him because he wasn't really associated with her originally in the pilot anyway. So that was kind of a weird thing too.
Yeah, and we'll touch on it eventually. We'll get to that episode way down the road. But
right.
Kip really didn't want her to marry Beaver. Well, I think he was happy when they were kind of getting back together, but you could tell in the beginning of the episode he was a little hesitant about her return. I think he was happy when he saw them kissing and they'd get back together, but he was a little wary of her. Like he didn't know if he wanted to take her back as his mom.
And that was Oliver, the younger brother, that was having those feelings of, he was like excited about his mom, the girlfriend. He wasn't happy with the girlfriend. And, it just seemed like Kip was in the background. You didn't see a whole lot of interaction because it was kind of irrelevant from when the story that most viewers knew from the beginning with the mother and the other brother, so.
Right. And, I love this song, Take the Long Road Home. That's a great song, you're listening to it. But, so, I mean, like I said, you always felt bad for Beaver because he was and, one other thing I wanted to touch on too, I kind of forgot to bring it up, but, June Cleaver's kind of recapping their lives and stuff like that. And it's really interesting because I think, Wally was 4 or 5 years older than the Beaver. And it was interesting that the Beaver had 2 kids already and Wally had none. But as you see in the series, Kelly and Oliver are basically the same age. So, I mean, they kind of changed some things when they did the series.
Yep.
Yeah. So now Wally's over at Haskell Construction. And, it's funny. We talked about the Eddie Haskell character a lot. And, he hasn't changed. He's still a scam artist. He hasn't really grown up too much. He's just an older version of the younger Eddie Haskell.
Yeah.
And, you see that he kind of didn't, make his promises on Wally's house and stuff. And, it's funny. Throughout the whole Leave It to Beaver series, I don't ever remember I think Wally came close a few times, but I don't think he ever hit Eddie. This is the first time you ever see him hit Eddie. And it's funny, as grown adults, he decides to hit him now.
And he's a lawyer, so that makes it more funny.
Yeah. I really like Janice Kent, though. I think she did a great job playing, Mary Ellen. I really thought that, she was a believable character. And, I was really happy about that. They gave Wally, a very good wife to kind of play that role. And I thought she did a great job,
Yeah. She did very well. And she was another one we talked to as well. And it was kind of cool when she came to the studio. She saw Tony and she said, "Well, I guess I'm going to be playing your wife." So and she did very well. And her story was kind of very much if many fans know the story about Jerry and how he got his role. He found out he was the very last person to audition, and he was the one that got the role. Kind of the same thing with Janice Kent. And, I think they just, they hit the jackpot with her. She did very well and made a very good wife for Wally.
Yeah. And, it's funny because it looks like Wally's not going to hit him, and then he just decides to do it.
Yeah.
I think that was probably 30 years in the making. He was, probably always wanting to hit him, and he finally said, "You know what? I got to let out one punch on you." And
Well, he was always the good guy. Eddie did hit him once,
yes, I
and he
remember that.
restrained himself. So maybe it was from that point on he was starting to build the momentum towards him.
Yeah, most definitely, and just a real funny scene. And now we get to where Beaver returns home. He finds the key. Kind of opens the house, and he kind of flashes back to his childhood. And one of the best scenes that he flashed back to, he's kind of remembering his father, and it's the story he did on his father's career. And that was one of my favorite scenes. I get chills talking about it right now because he had said, he may not mean much to you because he's not your dad. He's just my dad. And, he's the type of guy that, will spend his whole weekend making junk with me and stuff like that. And you saw how moved Ward was when he read that essay or whatever you want to call it, book report that Beaver did.
Yeah.
And, that's where I was kind of getting sentimental with when I was a kid with that episode because, my father had known that Ward, Hugh Bowman had died. He's the one who said it. Because I think my sister might have said, I wonder why the father's not in there. My father had said the father died, so.
Right.
It was just, I never knew that, and that was kind of, and that was kind of upsetting because, to me, the Ward Cleaver character, he was the perfect dad as well. I mean, he had to discipline his kids when he did, but he was always very understanding to his two boys. And I always really enjoyed his character.
Yeah, he was. And you're talking about that scene where he, it's weird when I was seeing it, it was after, 30 years, people like our parents' age were looking at that and they were seeing, a child that were the same age as they were and that he was reminiscing. So it was kind of like they were doing the same, like, back in that same era, they were the same age or, a child at the same time that he was. So when I was watching it, I had this like empty feeling, like my childhood was gone, even though it wasn't, like I could feel I could feel his feelings, like he's going back to his childhood and he's having all these thoughts and it's kind of, it was sad,
Yeah. And then, you finally realize that they're all at the cemetery and, it's raining, they've got their umbrellas on and, it was just like kind of a sad moment, but I really was glad that they kind of did do like a good 5-6 minutes on the Ward Cleaver character. They kind of made sure they paid tribute to him. And that was always kind of a regret, because it would have been interesting to see what kind of grandfather Ward Cleaver would have been, as like and we will get into it more as time goes on. They kind of made the June Cleaver character a little more, you saw, an angrier side to her sometimes in the new Leave It to Beaver that you didn't really see in the original series. She finally let her frustrations out with the Haskells. And, she could even get mad at her grandkids sometimes, when they weren't doing things right. So, I thought that was it.
And she would get mad at the boys, like, Wally and Beaver.
Yeah. So now, we get to the scene where she comes home and she sees Beaver drinking out of the bottle and she realizes, he's really home. And, you could tell she's happy to see him, but, he came home because A, he has nowhere to go, and B, he's going through a divorce, a separation, which, is really killing him right now. And, that's the thing too, that probably everything that he's went through in his life, this is the hardest because he doesn't have his wife. He doesn't have his two boys at the moment. So, right now, he kind of just feels like his world is unraveling a little bit.
Right. And he's hitting a low point in his life and, he feels like there's nowhere to turn. He's feeling lonely. He lost his job. He lost his wife. So he's at a very low point in his life and he's trying to figure out how to deal with it.
Yeah. I don't care. I don't know how you feel about this, but I've always felt about this. And right now, we'll get to the next scene in a second, but you can't convince me that Beaver wasn't June's favorite kid. There is no doubt about it. And that's no knock at Wally, but you could just tell that like Beaver was her baby, and he was definitely, number one son.
Well, he's the younger one, and I grew up as an older brother too. Like, it's,
Yeah.
The younger one always is the last one. The baby always gets the attention, as many of the older siblings think. But
Yeah. So
he's her baby. So yeah.
That's no knock at Wally. And as you see here, Wally's helping June kind of walk in with the groceries and stuff. And now Wally's kind of, I don't know if it's June flashing back or it's Wally, but you see a little flashback scene between Beaver and Wally. And one thing, say what you want about Wally though, Beaver had probably the best big brother you could ever have, because Wally was always there for him when Beaver screwed up. He always, he'd always stick up for him. And you see the two brothers right now, and Wally says hello to him, and it kind of makes a joke at him, but at the same time, you could tell that like that bond was always there between the two brothers.
Yeah, it was always strong. I was lucky too. My older brother and I always called him my Wally bro. He's my older brother with roughly the same age difference, and
right.
He and I were very tight, and we rarely fought. And to this day, of course, he lives in Texas. I live in Wisconsin. We don't see much of each other, but when we talk, it's like Wally and Beaver in that scene where it's like they don't miss a beat, and they make it appear like they haven't seen each other in a long time. I don't know where Beaver and his wife lived, but you
got to figure it's 20 years since the series ended at this point.
Right.
So, Beaver, I think Beaver was in 8th grade when the series ended, and Wally had just graduated high school.
Yeah.
So you figure Wally probably went to college, then law school. Beaver had to go to high school, then he probably went to college. So, I'm sure like for a long time period, they probably weren't together as much. I'm sure they kept in touch, but they did go their separate ways,
right?
With the age gap, what it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I always liked the Wally character though. He always, they all made me laugh on the show. They were all funny, but I mean, Wally would crack me up though. He would I always used to joke how he'd always say, boy, Beef, would you do a crummy thing like that for?
My dad always laughs at those. Oh, Beaver, you stupid little kid, and to this day, I've always thought that Wally had the best lines. Like Eddie was great. His character was great, but I think
but he was Eddie at times wasn't likable,
Right. But he gets credit for awesome line delivery, which I'm not knocking at all. He was a great character, but I think Wally had the biggest. He had the best one-liners. One that comes to mind is when he says, "You can't drink milk from a cow; it's unhealthy. A lot of people have to handle it before it's fit to drink."
Yeah, and then when Beaver was going to get in trouble by Ward, and Wally would say, "Are you going to clobber him, Dad?" Something like that. He would just say, he'd say that. The funny thing is like Wally should know better, because Ward probably never hit Wally, so why would he hit Beaver? And Wally made his share of mistakes too as a young kid, but it's like you said, I mentioned to you when we we're talking about some characters a couple of weeks ago. I mentioned how funny Gilbert was. Gilbert was funny in the sense that I felt like out of all Beaver's friends, he made me laugh the most. But the character who made me laugh the most on the show was Wally. I mean, he was
me too.
He had that way about him. And Beaver was funny. He was definitely funny too. But Beaver was always getting in trouble so much that when Wally reacted to it, it was just perfect the way Wally, how he kind of reacted to everything. When Beaver let that bomb in the house that time, he's like, boy, Beaver, what'd you do a stupid thing like that for? You know, it was just,
Yeah.
you know, always hysterical, and you know, just always made me laugh. So now, it's Beaver's turn to pick up his sons, and you know, you kind of Oliver is more receptive to Beaver than you know Corey, aka Kip, is. You could tell that for some reason Corey is being you know very reluctant towards Beaver, you know, spending
Hmm.
time with him and stuff, and you know, as you're gonna see, you know, probably in this scene, I think as well, she tells Beaver she's going away to school or something like that, and she
Hmm.
needs him to take the boys. So, you know, he loses his marriage, but he is regaining his boys, which, you know, I don't think at the time he was really receptive to either. He didn't want to raise them by himself, but
Yeah.
you know, that's what was always kind of weird about what was her name, Kimberly, I think. That was
Kimberly was
always
his wife.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That was always kind of weird about her character because you know she kind of came across as a you know all for herself type person. You know, like I don't know how you leave your kids behind. I really don't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's tough. And, because at first it was, he was fearing he was going to fight for the kids.
yeah,
So it was a weird premise, but like you said, you have to have a backstory. You have to have,
yeah,
Kimberly was there, and then all of a sudden, all the season of the four seasons of the show, there's no Kimberly. I think they mention her maybe once or twice,
very
but
rare though.
but
Yeah,
very rare. It was like in their back pocket. If you do the backstory, great, but
yeah,
it wasn't, but it was, again, it was Disney Channel. Most of the
yeah.
people that saw the show didn't see the movie, so I mean, yeah, so, but yeah, I always thought that was weird too. Like, she was there and all of a sudden, bam, gone.
And I'll tell you, she came across very bad in that final episode. She really did. I mean, you know, she
Yeah.
was just trying to make that guy jealous. That's why she went back to Beaver. I mean, she just, you know, sometimes I couldn't I guess the writers were trying to make you realize that Beaver was the better parent in the end. I think that's what they were
Yeah.
trying to make you show, you know, but
Yeah.
he's at the zoo with the boys, and you know, this is where you kind of see where Corey is. Oliver, like I said, was a little difficult, but not as bad. Corey was really difficult. He's giving Beaver a hard time about putting ketchup on his hot dog, you know, and you could just see that Beaver is not used to being a single parent. Like he's not used to kind of, you know, having this
Taking the
role.
reins.
Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
you could see that like he's a little overwhelmed right now. And, you know, he's also, I don't want to say he's not getting the love from his boys, but he's definitely not getting the support I think he was
Yeah.
hoping for. So, you know, you see that like adult Beaver where like right now he's kind of, like I said, his life is kind of unraveling a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's funny that the scene with Corey reminded me a lot of me when I was that age, because I was a very picky eater. If
Yeah.
I would, in fact, my dad wouldn't even ask for it to be plain or whatever. No ketchup. It would be as is. And, Beaver takes the ketchup off. He's not going to buy another hot dog.
Yeah.
It was weird, and then they go to the dinner table and it's Chinese food, and it's like, Chinese food, like that would be me.
Yeah. Yeah. He was definitely, you know, and that's what I did like though, because that is a normal type of kid for that age. You know, they are fussy when it comes to food and stuff, you know, though, you know, most kids like ketchup on stuff. So I was kind of surprised he didn't. But
Yeah.
now we go to Larry Mandela. And, you know, keep in mind, this is probably the first time we see him since 1960, because as you remember, he wasn't
Yep.
on the final 3 seasons. And, you know, it is kind of funny what he looks like as an adult, because with the beard, and you can't really see his hair, because I forget what he was in some type of religion,
Yeah.
and you know, you kind of see like a grown-up Larry, and it doesn't look anything like him. It's the same actor, of course, Rusty Stevens, I believe.
Yep.
But you know, it was nice to see him again, because he was another one. I don't think he gets mentioned again in the series until the final episode when they're going through the scrapbook.
Right.
And he was really like Beaver's best friend those first 3 seasons. I think he was on about 60 episodes, which is a
Yep.
lot for, a recurring character. So,
Yep.
it was nice to see him come back again. And, I thought that was great that they were able to get him to come back because I think he had given up acting after that. So
Right.
that's not always easy because a lot of these child actors and actresses, if you notice, and that's why it's like so hard to interview them and stuff is because they don't really want to go back to that. They don't.
Right.
Not every one of them looks fondly on that, and
Right.
so it was nice to see they got him back.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when he came back, I thought it was so cool because, well, like I've said before, I saw the original show first by mere weeks before I saw the new series. And then I was like, oh, this is cool. This is a new version of this show that I just started to watch. And then I was so disappointed that, Whitey wasn't in it. Gilbert wasn't in it.
Yeah.
Larry wasn't in it. So when I finally did see that movie, which was chopped up in 4 parts, I really thought, I was like, oh, there's Larry. And, so it was really cool. Again,
Right.
disappointed that we didn't see.
I do think though Larry came back for a couple more, didn't he? Didn't he come to Beaver's like bachelor party or something?
That was in the 2-part series, and he did come back, and he wasn't part of the religion anymore. Which I'm sorry if I'm spoiling anything because they are finally out there. There's people that have not seen them, but they are finally available on YouTube. All episodes uncut. So unfortunately, he did come back for that little bit of time, and he was mentioned one time in the series. It was in the episode where Kip and Freddie make a music video, and they find out they're not that great. And then so Beaver starts talking about his band days, which refers to his
Gilbert. Yeah.
He refused. It refers to the same band name that he and Richard Carell were in real life, which were Beaver and the Trappers. And so he says, it was me, Richard, Gilbert, and Larry Mondello. We never paid Larry Mondello, but we never paid Larry.
And what's funny about that though is like he mentions how Larry's in the band, right? So you got to figure these guys are in high school, you know. So here's my thing though. Larry was gone before Beaver got to high school. So when did Larry come back? It's those little things that you always wonder about, that you're never really going to know about. And it's funny you mentioned Richard Carell because he comes in this scene as well. He comes with Larry, I believe. Yeah. And, I think I brought this up on the message site. Now, somebody told me they definitely were in some episodes together during the series, but I always felt like Richard came after Larry, but obviously they were in a few episodes together, but they really didn't have as much interaction. So it was kind of cool in the movie that they kind of came together.
Yeah. And I'm pretty good on all of this stuff. And I don't believe Richard and Larry were ever in the same episode together.
Yeah. They might've been on the show at the same time. But
it might have been the same season. It might have been a transitional thing where Larry was gone. Larry might have been mentioned in an episode that Richard was in, but I don't think they were together in a scene.
Yeah, it definitely didn't. From what I could see, it definitely didn't seem like they had many scenes together. It is cool though that they're kind of at the basketball court, I believe, and they're watching Beaver kind of shoot the ball and, they're not really, you could tell Larry's not into sports anymore at this point, but it is cool because, although Gilbert was my favorite character as far as Beaver's friends went, Larry to me was an important character on that show because he was Beaver's best friend. They kind of got in trouble together. They were good friends. Again, when I talk about like how some of the parents on these shows were not the best to their kids. Well, Larry Mondello, I mean, his mother to me, she always seemed like she was always, kind of shaming him a lot on the show.
Yeah. She was a little rough on him. And she was by himself a lot. She was by herself a lot with him. And, I think she didn't handle the...
Yeah, because I don't think we ever saw the father, correct?
Yeah, you saw him once. He never spoke, but he did appear in the pet fair
Oh yeah, you're
episode,
right.
but
Yeah,
that's, or no, not the pet fair, or was it the pet fair? I know where they went to the play. That's right. The
yeah,
where Beaver's supposed to be a canary and
yeah.
Larry is a frog, and I think it was that one. Yeah,
Now, interestingly, the series was in black and white. You look at Larry, you could tell he's a redhead because he's got like a red beard.
yeah,
Just a
yeah.
little thing that we never would know if they didn't do this reunion because we only saw the show in black and white, so we really didn't, get to see, um, things like that. But you could just tell now Beaver's, it's late at night and he's at Wally's. I think it's his office, maybe his house, and you could just tell that like Beaver is really just having a tough time, and I think he gets a phone call from Kimberly, where I think she tells him,
Oh
she's
yeah,
not, yeah, she's not coming home for a while. He's gonna have to take the boys, and I feel like it's bittersweet for him because he wants to be married, he wants that family, but
yeah,
he is getting his son, so I think like he's a little torn
yeah.
because he kind of thinks she's kind of passing them off on him, and so he's having a tough time with that. And I mean, you could just tell right now in the early parts of this movie, it's really about Beaver, trying to find himself again and, trying to put his life somewhat back together.
Right. Yeah. That's one thing. Divorced families, and I've thought about this. What would have been like, and it's pretty cool how Bryan did it. But he was able. You got to get June in the mix. When you're planning all the characters, you're planning the series,
Yeah.
the movie, and June's got to help, and so yeah, it would have been interesting that if they would have kept Beaver and Kimberly together. The house, they got to have the house because that's a character in itself. But yeah, it was very well done, except for the fact that she was never mentioned again, very much.
Yeah.
But
And she didn't come across too bad in this movie. Like, I mean, she did kind of, you could tell she cared about him, but she just couldn't be married to him. She came really, like I said, she came across very bad in the show. But now we fast forward a little bit. Beaver's at Wally's office. He's kind of going over his options with the divorce. And of course, Eddie comes in. And, I mean, Eddie used to pick on Beaver as a kid, and he's still kind of picking at him as an adult. The difference is this time, though, is Beaver, he's old enough to know how Eddie is, and he doesn't really, back down from Eddie.
No. And Eddie would be a guy that would waltz into a lawyer's, his best friend who was a lawyer into his office while he's conducting business. And it would just so happen that Beaver would be would be the one that he's working with. And, how Eddie was with Beaver. So it goes just like old times.
It was just, it was really, a funny, moment. Like, Eddie is just Eddie. I mean, they needed him to continue to be that character. You have to get people's interests, and every story needs a villain, and I'm not saying he's a big time villain, but he's definitely a villain in the sense that he his intentions are never good. That's what I kind of look at.
Right. He's the controversy in the story most of the time.
Yeah, he really is, and his name is synonymous though with, like, whenever you see somebody suck up or do something, they'll say, I didn't know Eddie Haskell was still in school,
It's funny. I had a friend growing up. He passed away this past March, unfortunately, but he was my Eddie Haskell friend, and we were best friends. I mean, we were best friends, and he was just like that. He was a very polite, very much like Eddie, because Eddie was never intended to be a bad guy. Yeah. He just had issues that caused him, like, well, even Beaver or what Ward said in an episode once, Eddie puts on this front, this character to kind of hide insecurities about himself.
Yeah.
And this buddy that I grew up with, he was very much like that, and very sincerely was a very genuinely nice person. but he was a troublemaker, and he would torment my sister, my mom, Mrs. Nelson, and very much like that. Hi,
Yeah.
Mrs. Nelson, very nice and proper all the time. And he and I actually, and I'm so mad I don't have the picture anymore, but there was a picture he and I met Jerry Mathers and Ken Osmond back when I was like 8th grade, and we went to go see him. He and I had our pictures together with him, and it was just so poetic because it was my Eddie Haskell with the real Eddie Haskell.
Eddie Haskell. Yeah.
So yeah, it's very much like that. And there's Eddie Haskell's all over the place. So.
Oh yeah, he'll live on forever, no doubt about it.
Right.
So now Beaver meets up with Whitey, and of course, Whitey at this point is played by Ed Begley Jr. And what's really weird about this scene is, I mean, he's just cracking up the entire scene. Like, what is so funny that he's cracking up about? Because Whitey never came across that way.
When I was a kid, I thought maybe he was losing a marble or two, but as an adult, I think he had a couple too many cocktails during this interview that was at a restaurant. You know what I mean? I think he had a little too much.
Now let me ask you, did you, obviously as kids we couldn't really tell the difference, but as adults and you watch this, are you a little disappointed that they replaced the Whitey character, or were you okay with it?
Well, I knew they were different actors again because I seen, in 1983 I didn't see it as the movie.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in 1983, I was 5 years old. I might have remembered it, but I saw it much later, and I knew that it was a different actor. And yes, I was disappointed about it because I thought, well, why don't they get the same actor? Of course, years later, I would find out why. But yeah, I was very disappointed that he wasn't in it. And I kind of thought, why did they replace, even as a kid, I thought, why replace him,
Yeah. So
and other, Gilbert, we never see him, and like, I think I said this before, it would have been cool. Okay, you couldn't get the actors, but it would have been cool if maybe been an episode where, oh yeah, I was at the grocery store and Gilbert was, was in the line with me, something like that. Jill Bartlett was mentioned in a new episode where they're at the class reunion, and Lumpy mentions her.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about just mentioning him. How many times on Happy Days? I don't know if you watched that show a lot.
Oh yeah.
How many times before we finally saw the Jenny Piccolo character was she mentioned and never seen?
Of course.
So, you could still implement the characters without seeing them, and that was always a disappointment. You brought up the Gilbert character. Like I said, I really enjoyed that character, and I would have liked to see him in a couple, just a couple episodes. But I do know that life went on for a lot of these kids, because these kids, like, they weren't in high school yet when the show ended. So they went to high school afterwards. They kind of gave up acting, and that's the part of it that's a little disappointing, but you do understand it.
Oh yeah, and well, I'm from Milwaukee. I think every Milwaukee citizen has seen Happy Days, only because it took place in Milwaukee. And and it's kind of cool, when talking to Brian Levant, we obviously had to tell him, we're in Milwaukee. And, the interview was a little west of there in Waukesha, actually. But it's really cool. There's a bronze Fonz by the lake. There's a statue of the Fonz by the lake. And Brian even mentioned that, the cast of Happy Days was in Milwaukee, and they played baseball at County Stadium. And
So now we go to the infamous Fred Rutherford, played by Richard Deegan. And here, I told you last week when I talked to you that I would have a lot to say about him as time went on. And, funny character. He really wasn't. He was great on the Dick Van Dyke Show. I mean, really good actor. But here's the thing about Fred. I mean, he would make his son, Clarence, Lumpy, this awesome kid, this,
Yeah.
spectacular human being in
Yeah.
public, but he was very down on him in private. He was
Yeah.
embarrassed to him in private. So just give me your thoughts on the Fred Rutherford character.
Well, it's weird. I've always had a very psychological mind. I've always was, looked into people psychologically, even as a young kid. It's really weird. And so I really think that, that old saying that, parents live through their children.
Yeah.
Fred very much did that. And he would oftentimes make his son look better than what he really was
Yeah.
because he wanted him to be like that.
Yeah.
Kind of like a denial thing. And so, I really liked the one episode where Ward pointed that out to him, and he said, Fred, you're not upset as to Lumpy as you are with your own insecurities. And
Yeah.
so Fred was hilarious. Richard Deacon was a very funny actor.
Yeah.
A character actor in his time, that was very much remembered, but he was always like a character actor. He was never like a star of anything. Very
Right.
funny actor. And I'm glad that at least he was able to be in the movie.
Yeah, because we got to see an updated version of him. Now, here you see Lumpy. He walks into the room, he sees Beaver, and he's kind of going at it with Beaver. And it's kind of funny because I really liked in the new series that they became partners, because it was good to see that, they started to respect each other as adults. Now, in this movie, they kind of still make Lumpy kind of giving him a hard time. And here you see, Frank Bank, as Lumpy, he doesn't have the beard yet. I really felt like that beard kind of added to the adult Lumpy. I really liked that he had the beard because it made him look more like an adult to me.
And the story of the beard, right?
What was that?
The story, the story of his beard?
No, I don't. No.
The reason why Frank grew the beard is because, like we mentioned earlier, a lot of times actors want to escape their past roles, especially when they're children and when they portray these people as children, because they don't want them following them. Tony mentioned this in the interview that I did with him, and they want to escape that character because it's like their identity. And so Frank grew that beard because he didn't want to be associated as Lumpy anymore. And when he was approached to do the movie, he's like, "Oh yeah, cool, we'll do the movie." They asked him to shave the beard. He shaved the beard. But then when he came back, then they wanted him to do the series, and he was a little reluctant about doing the series. He was a successful accountant and financial guy. So he had a business that was successful and needed attention. So he did do the series, and he was able to do his business as well. But he grew the beard back. And like you said, it's kind of cool because it added to his adult. He kind of looked like a baby face, actually, without the beard.
I didn't, when I saw him in the movie, because I had seen him, I watched the movie when it first came out, but you don't always remember everything. And as I watched the series, I remember him having the beard. So when I saw this movie again recently and he didn't have the beard, I was like, I'm glad he grew it, because it really, you saw like he looked like an adult at that point.
He was an adult. Exactly. Yeah. And that was, And again, I didn't see the movie until I saw 4 parts of it after I've seen the series for so long. So then I saw him. It was kind of cool because it was like, when I'm seeing these episodes, I'm seeing them all as, as they're not even in order as if they, when they aired, they were in syndication. So when I saw them in syndication, I saw this episode, that episode, and then all of a sudden this special comes on, and I was like, oh, cool. Like, they go back in the past. And to me, it didn't even come across that, oh, this was a movie at one time, or this was a past episode. So for me, it was kind of cool because when I watched it, I was like, oh, whoa, there's Lumpy Young. And there's wow, Beaver. And then I thought, after I saw Mr. Rutherford, the new actor, I was like, oh, there's the original Mr. Rutherford. And I thought that was really cool. So, and then, then you saw Whitey. Wasn't really Whitey, but
Yeah.
it was cool he was great.
Right. And Lumpy is it saying to his father, "You're hiring Cleaver," he doesn't kind of agree with it. And again, Fred is just, even Lumpy and he's an adult now, Lumpy, so you figure he's probably pushing 40 at this point. And he's still kind of, shaming him. Nothing's changed. And what hasn't changed either is 20 years later, and he's still calling him daddy. And, you hear Fred say, "Stop calling me daddy." Like, that was always the running joke of Lumpy on that series, is he always called him daddy.
Stop calling me daddy. You're too big for that.
And it was funny on the show, but I did think, now that he was older and it was, leave it to be, he was an adult, I was like, okay, you got to get the daddy thing out of there. But, the Lumpy character, I didn't mind him on the show, the original one. He didn't really bother me. He was okay. But I really liked the adult Lumpy better. He really, the adult Lumpy with the beard, I really thought he gave a new dynamic to that character.
Well, and, like I said, all these actors that didn't like their roles as a kid, as they got older, when they realized that the shows were so loved and iconic, they were genuinely loved by people. Leave It to Beaver is one of these shows that is in American history. It's stamped in Americana, and they realized that. So Frank embraced the character later on, and in fact, he got his license plate read "I'm Lumpy."
Yeah,
and people would finally, he had to change the plate because people were starting to find him, and he didn't like the harassment part of it, but he did like the fact that it was an iconic show that he was involved in.
And you see Lumpy here kind of telling Beaver that, when his father's ready, his father's kind of losing it and he's going to have to step aside. And Lumpy, not, never being smart, doesn't realize his dad's listening. And, that's the cardinal sin right there, because, his father already isn't too proud of him. And that just makes matters worse when he puts his foot in his mouth right there.
Yeah.
So, the funny thing is what I kind of looked at when Fred hired Beaver is, Beaver was always the son Fred really wishes he had,
Yeah.
I mean, because the funny thing about Fred is he would always rib Ward, and he would, say "old man Ward" or whatever he'd say. But Fred really looked up to Ward. I always felt that he really, that was like the one friend that Fred always wanted.
Right. And many people think that Ward worked under Fred, like Fred was his boss.
Yeah, and it wasn't.
And it wasn't. And I've never thought that, because, I don't even think Ward was ever his boss. They were equals. They were executives, and they had people working under them. But, even Ward had said, just people, did anyone think, Fred's jokes are funny? And he say to June, just the ones that work under him. They're executives, they work at a company, but he was never his boss.
Right. And now, we see Kimberly, she shows up at the Cleaver house. That was the part I was getting confused as to when she kind of told Beaver she needed him to take the kids. But it's actually here where she tells him, you've got to take Corey and Oliver. I will say this, too. I know that they used the Corey name for Feldman because they just probably figured it was easy for the movie, which tells me they didn't really know if they were going to have a TV series after that point. But I do like that his name was Kip afterwards, because I really didn't really like the Corey name for his son. I didn't think it was a name that Beaver would, name his son, really.
Right. And the reason, both of the names are what they were, because of because they went well with Cleaver. That was the same phonic sound as Cleaver.
Yeah.
So it was for that reason that they kept those names. And I can't put my finger on who it was that we talked to that revealed that. I don't know if it was Kip Marcus or if it was Brian Levant, but they had said, yeah, it was because of the name. The two names went well together: Corey
Right.
Cleaver, Kip Cleaver.
Yeah.
And I had asked Brian this. Kip, if you look in all the records online of the list of the cast, his name comes up as Ward Cleaver II, but he's never referred as that through the series ever. So I had asked Brian, I said, so what, was there ever a plan to like reveal that as his name? Or was that just kind of an homage, a private homage where all the crew knew of it, but the viewers didn't, simply because of Ward Cleaver, not being a part of the show, or not a part of the show, but not being able to appear in the show. So, and his answer was, there was supposed to be a reference with Ward and the name. There was a bunch of clips and flashbacks. And then that's when he revealed that he had found out that Hugh Beaumont had passed away when he was writing some of these episodes, and said that, unfortunately that one wasn't able to go in the can. I'm just, and it would have been wrong to replace him. They have a younger version of him in the new series from the time to time, but they never replace him, which would have been not a good thing. But it's too bad. I wish they would have come up with an episode that revealed Kip's real name, which would have been cool, and a good homage to Ward too.
Yeah. Well, you knew like he had to have a real name. Like, I don't think Kip is like, it's that was the actor's real name,
right?
But you knew there had to be something behind it, just like as we find out later, Bomber's real name is Edward. Beaver takes the boys, and then they're kind of roughhousing with each other in the car, and Beaver ends up getting hurt. It just makes me laugh seeing Beaver with the neck brace on, because it's just vintage. It's just vintage Beaver. He's always in the middle of something, whether he wants to be or not. But one thing throughout the movie that I think was very telling, and I think you'd probably agree, is the boys seem to bond very well with Wally, and I think that Beaver resents that, and I think that's like that jealousy part. Beaver is very proud to have Wally as his brother, and he was a great brother to Beaver. But I think Beaver's always felt like Wally's had the upper hand on him forever. He was the better athlete. He was probably the better student. Had more luck with the girls. And then now he's beating them with it. Wally has no kids. Beaver has two boys, and the boys seem to gravitate towards Wally more. So I think Beaver's resenting that. But Beaver, I don't think, realizes that, a lot of kids do that with people that aren't their parents, because they love their parents, but their parents, they fight with their parents sometimes. Mm-hmm. That's just how it goes. And I think like he's not understanding that it's nothing personal,
Right. And, and it's funny because Tony has often mentioned his acting abilities in the beginning of the first series, where he always says, I hate watching those earlier episodes because acting was so suspect. He felt like so robotic. Yeah. But when you see this Poyle, he's great. His acting is superb, but he really comes off as the cool uncle. The one that's like the fun guy, he comes up with the tennis ball to replace the baseball. And he's just, but Wally was always that way with Beaver. He knew psychology, children's psychology. He knew that as a teenager. So he knew how to handle that with the kids. And so he wanted to help Beaver. He wasn't trying to overshadow him. He was just naturally just trying to help him. And Beaver, again, feeling like Wally's doing better at this than I am. And this is kind of like a tribute a bit like the episode where Ward is trying too hard to be a good father, because I think this is what is happening to Beaver. He's going through so much, and then all of a sudden he's trying to build this home for his kids, and
Yeah.
he feels like he's failing because his kids doesn't like him, and so he's feeling upset about that. He can't, he's hurt, and he's figuring, I love my kids. Why can't they see that?
Yeah.
And he realizes, hey, I don't have to be this hard nosed dad. Just talk to them like our dad did with us.
Yeah. We talk about the Kip and Corey, and I think Kip was better for a few reasons. Number one, we were used to Kip. We saw the whole show and it was Kip. But I really think that Corey and Oliver were too close in age. At least it looked like it. And I think Kip had a nice age gap on Oliver, just enough where he really looked like an older brother who could kind of, give him advice, pick on him at times, but he was really, he was similar to Wally, like Wally was with Beaver. And I think that just was a better fit, and Kip, he seemed like, in a lot of ways, he was a lot like Wally is, he knew how to be a big brother to Oliver. And I just thought he was a better fit. And that's no knock at Corey, because Corey had a great child career. I mean,
he definitely did.
The kid was in everything. I mean, when I say everything, but I think for this type of role, Kip Marcus was the right choice.
I agree. And Corey, to me anyway, the reason why he didn't fit as a Cleaver is he just didn't have a positive vibe about him. And it might have been because he was resentful because of the divorce or whatnot. Maybe he would have been better as the series went on. But to me, he seemed too negative. And, you want to establish your own character, but when you're kind of a mirror of an old series, then you want to kind of, Kip did a very good job of being not Wally, but he was very good at being the next Wally, the next Cleaver older brother. Right. And he had that more positive vibe about him that Corey Feldman did not have. And like I said, maybe his character would have developed better, but to me, that's why Kip seemed to be a better fit than Corey at that time.
Right. Brian, we touched on like the key elements of this movie, and, at the end of the day, Beaver does, make up with his sons towards the end of the movie. He gets in a little scuffle with Wally, which was kind of funny, seeing them fight, but he realizes Wally had his best interests, and you see the two brothers hug, which was very nice. But to touch on the whole movie, we could, but at the same time, I felt like it was important to get the key elements together to kind of get to where we're going to get to with the series. And You're going to see changes in the series. There's no Kelly Cleaver in this movie. And when the show starts, Kelly Cleaver's the same age as Oliver. So, that's number one change that was made. Then, of course, number two, we have a different Fred Rutherford for the first episode because Richard Deacon had passed away. Number three is obviously Kip Marcus. He becomes the oldest son now, and he's now known as Kip. He's not Corey, and, they've kind of went in that direction. Then, number four, Lumpy has the beard now in the new series, which, again, I thought was very much needed. I like that they kept Mary Ellen there. That was good. Number five, Eddie Haskell. We see his family. Now, we do see Eric in this movie. Eric plays a small part in this movie. He gets in trouble with Corey in school.
Yeah.
And Eddie has to pick him up. But we do finally see that Eddie Haskell has a family. And, we find out he has another son in military school, Bomber, which, is vintage Eddie Haskell. He's got his son living away he's got one son that he really likes, which he kind of says that in the show. And
Yeah.
he doesn't really have, then he has the other son he doesn't really bother with till later in the series. So, you see a bunch of changes in the new series, but the premises is the same, the theme is the same. It's an older version of, Wally and Beaver, and of course June as a grandmother now and a widow wife.
Yeah.
So it's definitely some changes, but I really, really liked the new Leave It to Beaver. I enjoyed it. I'd watch it every Sunday when it was on. It was always on. It was on Disney first and TBS. And I think we're really gonna have fun, kind of recapping these episodes and kind of going over characters. So I really think this is going to be something that we're going to enjoy doing.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And man, I mean, when this show was on, let me tell you, like I said, we didn't have the Disney Channel. We did have TBS, but I didn't see the show. Hey, Thanksgiving is tomorrow.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is the Thanksgiving show is the first one I ever saw. I saw it in syndication on Milwaukee's Superstation, which was Super 18. And that was a local channel. It was, it played, all the 80s sitcoms at that time. And I didn't, that's when I was like, oh, this is so cool. So then I started watching it from there. And then I realized it was on Sundays and Mondays on TBS. And I didn't find out it was on Disney until years later. I didn't know that movie, that CBS movie, I didn't know that was one whole movie till years later. It was chopped up in the parts. But yeah, and then unfortunately, I mean, it was on for a while, and then in the 90s, I remember I was in middle school. I think when I was in high school, I remember I'd set the VCR to tape them, and all of a sudden they weren't on anymore, and never again. And it was because of rights, and unfortunately, it hasn't been on since. It's sad.
And, luckily, Scott's done a great job with, putting these episodes on YouTube, and I just pray they don't take them off. You never know with YouTube. But,
I know.
But they've been on a good year now, because I watched a lot of them when COVID was going on.
Oh, yeah.
So, I do think they're here to stay, which is good. I think they would have been taken off by now.
Right.
So, hopefully they continue to stay on. But it's good because I used to always remember certain episodes, and I'd be like, God, I wish I could see it again. Because you forget how certain things went, and you want to, like, I always wanted to see, like, Lumpy with the beard and all that stuff again. So it's good that we're getting to see these episodes, because the other thing is too, it's going to make it easier for us to really recap them, where we would have to just go by memory more so and hope that we get it right.
Yeah. It's ironic because unfortunately, like the movie, Scott's done awesome. The only unfortunate thing is that the new show, there's no legal copyrights right now that are being disputed because of its legal tangle that it has. Unfortunately, the original show does have copyright issues. So that's why when you watch one of his episodes that has a cut of an original episode, he's got to cut it in a clever way so that it doesn't get interfered with. So but he does a very good job at making it look natural as he can. It's so cool that you can just pop them on at any time and they're there. I'm so glad he did that. It's always been my tradition, and I'll be doing this tomorrow. I'll spend Thanksgiving with my family, but once things settle down, I'm going to watch the Thanksgiving episode that I originally taped back when it was on, when I watched it in 1987. and I was able to convert it to DVD, so I watch it then. And so, Scott has that episode on his site, and I will be posting it on the pages so that everyone can watch the Thanksgiving episode. So yeah, it's so cool. I'm so glad he was able to do that.
Yeah, and it's great job by him, and I think this is going to be fun, and we're going to have a blast with this, and I really hope people tune in because we'll try to do our best to kind of make it as fun for them as it's going to be for us.
Well, yeah, and I'll try to wear something original each time. I got the
Yeah.
state U sweatshirt today, and I got the green hat from Jerry's merchandise site. So, next time I'll see if I can dig something up that's different.
Well, sounds good. I look forward to doing this with you, and we're gonna have a lot of fun. And
It's gonna be a blast.
I will see you next episode. But first one is in the books, and I thought it was very good, and I really appreciate you giving me your insight. And look forward to doing this again. And thank you again.
Oh, you bet. I look forward to continuing.
And that's Bryan Nelson Jr. I'm Mike Cannici, and this is Talking New Leave It to Beaver. And until next time, have a great Thanksgiving, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
Take care, guys.